Bridge, this is combat. Bearing 035, range 8 nautical miles, inbound contact. Designate track 7214. She is not responding to hails. Say again, she is not responding. Contact is maintaining course and speed, Bridge. Recommend we go to general quarters. All stations, general quarters, general quarters. All hands man your battle stations. This is not a drill. I say again, this is not a drill. Set condition zebra throughout the ship. Helm, come to new course 040. Increase speed to 27 knots. Weapons, spin up Sea-Whiz mounts 1 and 2. Get me the strike group commander on secure. Bridge, combat. Second contact emerging from behind track 7214. Bearing 037, range 7.2. She is fast. Evaluate fast attack craft. A third. Bridge, I now hold 3, correction, 4 contacts. They are fanning out. This is a swarm profile. Weapons free, weapons free. Batteries release authorized. All stations stand by. What you just heard is a reconstruction of the radio communications that, according to naval monitoring reports being discussed across defense channels, unfolded aboard a United States Navy Arleigh Burke-class guided missile destroyer in the central Persian Gulf on the afternoon of May 5, 2026, at approximately 14:30 hours local time. This is no longer hypothetical. This is no longer a war game played out in classified simulation centers beneath the Pentagon. This is the new reality unfolding in real time in the waters between Iran and the Arabian Peninsula. And what the United States Navy did 6 hours after an Iranian vessel refused to alter course has sent shockwaves through every naval command, every foreign ministry, and every intelligence agency on Earth. 6 hours. That is how long it took for the situation to go from a routine challenge and response hail in international waters to something that no American naval commander has authorized since the Praying Mantis operation of April 1988, a direct kinetic engagement with Iranian naval assets in the Persian Gulf. 6 hours from a radio call to a firing solution. 6 hours from protocol to combat. 6 hours that will be studied, debated, and argued over in war colleges from Annapolis to St. Petersburg for the next 50 years. What exactly happened in those 6 hours? Why did Iran refuse to turn? What did the U.S. Navy do that has left even its own allies stunned? And what does this mean for the already fractured state of Gulf security at a moment when the entire region is closer to open war than it has been since the tanker wars of the 1980s? Stay with us because this is the story that the official channels are not telling you in full. If you want raw, no-nonsense analysis that cuts through the sanitized press briefings and the diplomatic doublespeak, hit the like button right now, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications. Drop your thoughts in the comments because what you are about to hear will demand a response. The sequence began at approximately 0800 hours Gulf Standard Time on May 5 when the USS Fitzgerald, an Arleigh Burke-class Flight 2A guided missile destroyer, displacing roughly 9,600 tons and carrying a weapons suite that includes 96 vertical launch cells loaded with a mix of Standard Missile-2 surface-to-air interceptors, Tomahawk land attack cruise missiles with a range exceeding 1,600 kilometers, and RIM 162 Evolved Sea Sparrow missiles for close-in air defense, was conducting a routine transit through the central Persian Gulf, approximately 47 nautical miles southeast of Iran's Karg Island oil terminal. The Fitzgerald was operating as part of Carrier Strike Group 11, attached to the 5th Fleet, under standard freedom of navigation protocols that have governed American naval movements in these waters for over 4 decades. There was nothing unusual about the transit. There was nothing provocative about the course. The ship was in international waters, following a shipping lane used by hundreds of commercial vessels every week. To appreciate what happened next, you need to understand the pattern that has defined Iranian naval behavior in these waters for the better part of 2 decades. The IRGCN has conducted an estimated several hundred aggressive approach incidents against American and Allied warships in the Persian Gulf since 2007, a campaign of systematic provocation designed to test reaction times, probe defensive protocols, and demonstrate to domestic audiences that the Revolutionary Guard can operate with impunity under the guns of the most powerful navy in the world. Fast attack craft racing across the bow of an American destroyer at distances of less than 100 meters. Speedboats armed with rocket launchers circling a guided missile cruiser at full throttle. Drones launched from Iranian coastline positions to overfly carrier strike groups. Each incident has followed the same script. The IRGCN approaches aggressively, the American warship issues warnings, the Iranian vessels eventually peel off, and nothing happens. No shots fired, no consequences imposed, no price paid. Over years, this pattern created a psychological assumption inside the IRGCN that has become doctrine by repetition. The Americans will not shoot. The Americans are too cautious, too politically constrained, too afraid of escalation to respond with anything more dangerous than a radio call and a flare. That assumption held for nearly 20 years. On May 5th, 2026, it died. At 0817, the Fitzgerald's radar operators detected a surface contact emerging from the Iranian coast on a bearing that would bring it across the destroyer's bow at a distance of roughly 12 nautical miles. Standard procedure dictates that the American vessel issue a bridge-to-bridge radio challenge on VHF Channel 16, identifying itself and requesting the approaching vessel's intentions. The challenge was issued. No response. A second challenge was issued 5 minutes later, this time in both English and Farsi, identifying the Fitzgerald by name and requesting the contact to state its course and intentions. No response. A third challenge issued at 0831 added a warning that the approaching vessel was standing into danger and should alter course immediately. No response. The contact maintained its bearing and its speed, closing the distance at approximately 18 knots. This was not an anomaly. This was the pattern. The same script the IRGCN had followed hundreds of times before. The same calculated silence designed to generate maximum tension on the American bridge, while demonstrating Iranian contempt for the warnings that had never, not once in 20 years, been followed by anything that drew blood. What happened next, according to the operational timeline being pieced together from multiple defense sources, was a rapid escalation that compressed hours of normal diplomatic and military protocol into minutes. The Fitzgerald's captain, operating under standing rules of engagement that authorize graduated defensive measures against vessels demonstrating hostile intent in Gulf waters, ordered the ship to general quarters and directed the Mk-15 Phalanx close-in weapon system mounts to active tracking mode. The Sea-Whiz, a 20-millimeter Gatling gun capable of firing 4,500 rounds per minute at incoming threats, is the last line of defense on an American warship. Activating it to tracking mode signals that the ship considers itself under imminent threat. Simultaneously, the Fitzgerald launched an MH-60R Seahawk helicopter from its flight deck to visually identify the approaching contact. The helicopter crew reported back within minutes. The contact was an Iranian Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps Navy Hendijan-class patrol boat, a 40-meter vessel known to operate in aggressive harassment patterns against Western warships in the Gulf. And it was not alone. Within 15 minutes of the initial detection, the Fitzgerald Spy-1D phased array radar, a system capable of tracking over 100 contacts simultaneously across a range of 370 kilometers, had identified 4 additional fast-moving surface contacts emerging from the Iranian coastline on converging bearings. 5 vessels, 5 bearings, all closing on the Fitzgerald, none responding to hails. This was not a navigation error. This was not a fishing fleet wandering into the wrong lane. This was a coordinated approach profile consistent with the IRGCN swarm doctrine that American naval intelligence has been tracking and wargaming against for over 2 decades. The Fitzgerald's captain made the call that every American commanding officer in the Gulf has trained for and prayed they would never have to make. At 0946, 9:47, the destroyer fired 2 warning shots from its 5-inch Mark 45 naval gun, a weapon that fires a 31-kilogram projectile at a muzzle velocity of 808 meters per second, placing the rounds approximately 500 meters ahead of the lead Iranian vessel's bow. The sound of a 5-inch gun firing across open water is unmistakable. It is a sound that carries for miles. It is a sound that means the conversation is over. The Iranians did not alter course. They did not slow down. They did not respond on any frequency. They accelerated. For the next 6 hours, from 09:47 until approximately 15:50, the situation deteriorated into what defense analysts are describing as the most dangerous naval confrontation in the Persian Gulf since the USS Vincennes incident of July 1988. The Fitzgerald, now operating at full combat readiness with its entire weapons suite active, began a series of defensive maneuvers designed to maintain distance from the approaching swarm while remaining within the operational umbrella of the carrier strike group. The carrier USS Theodore Roosevelt, a Nimitz-class nuclear-powered supercarrier displacing over 100,000 tons and operating with an air wing of approximately 75 aircraft, including FA-18EF Super Hornets, armed with AGM-84 Harpoon anti-ship missiles, launched a combat air patrol of 4 Super Hornets that arrived overhead within 22 minutes of the Fitzgerald's initial contact report. The destroyer USS Halsey, another Arleigh Burke-class ship operating as part of the strike group's escort screen, was directed to close on the Fitzgerald's position at maximum speed. Within 2 hours, the Americans had assembled a layered defensive perimeter of staggering firepower around the contested zone. 2 guided missile destroyers, 4 fighter aircraft overhead, a nuclear carrier within strike range, and an improved Los Angeles-class attack submarine that defense sources indicate was repositioned from its patrol area to a position beneath the confrontation zone, its torpedo tubes loaded with Mark 48 advanced capability torpedoes, each one carrying a 295-kilogram warhead at speeds exceeding 55 knots to a range of over 50 kilometers. And then, at 15:50 hours, 6 hours and 3 minutes after the first unanswered radio hail, the United States Navy did what it has not done in 38 years. According to reports being analyzed across multiple defense and intelligence channels, the Fitzgerald, acting under rules of engagement that had been updated by the strike group commander during the course of the confrontation, engaged one of the Iranian fast attack craft with its 5-inch gun after the vessel crossed within 2 nautical miles of the destroyer on what the captain determined was an attack approach profile. The round struck the water approximately 30 meters from the Iranian vessel's hull. It was not a miss. It was a deliberate near hit. A shot placed close enough to shred the Iranian boat's deck fittings with shrapnel and spray, but calibrated to avoid a direct kill that would have sunk the vessel and potentially killed its crew. In naval warfare terms, this is the last step before a killing blow. It is a shot that says the next round goes through your engine room. The Iranian vessel turned. All 5 Iranian vessels turned. Within 11 minutes of the engagement, every IRGCN contact had reversed course and was heading back toward the Iranian coastline at maximum speed. The confrontation was over. The shooting had lasted less than 30 seconds. But the 6 hours that preceded it and the decision that ended it have fundamentally altered the rules of engagement in the Persian Gulf. In Tehran, the reaction was immediate and volcanic. The IRGCN issued a statement through Iranian state media within 3 hours of the engagement, calling the American action an act of piracy and a violation of Iranian sovereign waters, a claim contradicted by the Fitzgerald's navigational data, which reportedly places the engagement firmly within international waters as defined by the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea. Iran's Supreme National Security Council held an emergency session on the evening of May 5th. The Iranian Foreign Ministry summoned the Swiss ambassador, who represents American interests in Tehran, to deliver a formal protest. But beneath the diplomatic fury, a colder reality was settling over the Iranian military establishment. The Americans had fired, not a warning flare, not a smoke round, a 5-inch high-explosive projectile from a weapon system designed to destroy surface combatants. They had crossed the line that 38 years of restraint, of proportional response, of graduated escalation, of turning the other cheek to IRGCN provocations had kept inviolate since Operation Praying Mantis in 1988. That line is gone now, and every IRGCN commander who sends a fast boat out to harass an American destroyer knows it. In Moscow, the reaction was one of strategic recalculation. Russia has been cultivating its relationship with Iran as a counterweight to American power in the Middle East, providing diplomatic cover at the United Nations, facilitating technology transfers, and coordinating energy policy through OPEC+. But Russia has no interest in being dragged into a naval confrontation with the United States in the Persian Gulf. Moscow's calculation depends on Iran being a useful irritant to Washington, not a tripwire that triggers a shooting war. An Iran that provokes direct kinetic engagements with American warships is an Iran that threatens to pull Moscow into a conflict it cannot afford, at a time when Russian forces are already stretched to their operational limits in Ukraine. The Kremlin's message to Tehran in the hours after the engagement, according to diplomatic channels being monitored by Western intelligence services, was reportedly blunt. Do not give Washington a reason to escalate further. In Beijing, the concern was immediate and economic. The engagement occurred within the central Persian Gulf shipping corridor, approximately 60 nautical miles from the route used by Chinese-flagged oil tankers transiting to and from the Kharg Island terminal. Any military confrontation that disrupts tanker traffic in these waters directly threatens Chinese energy security. Beijing's foreign ministry issued a carefully worded statement calling for restraint from all parties, but the internal assessment, according to analysis being discussed in regional security forums, was sharper. China does not want the Gulf to become a shooting gallery, because China is the customer that depends most heavily on the goods that flow through it. In European capitals, the reaction split between alarm and quiet satisfaction. London, Paris, and Berlin publicly called for de-escalation and diplomatic resolution, the standard language that Western foreign ministries deploy when they want to appear responsible without committing to anything. But behind closed doors, according to assessments circulating in NATO intelligence sharing channels, the European reaction was more nuanced. The American willingness to fire, to actually put steel on target after years of absorbing Iranian provocations without response, was seen as a reassertion of deterrence credibility that European naval commanders operating in the Gulf under Operation Sentinel and the European Maritime Awareness Mission had been privately requesting for months. Every time an IRGCN fast boat buzzed a European frigate without consequence, deterrence eroded. The Fitzgerald's 5-inch round may have been aimed at an Iranian patrol boat, but its message landed in every naval headquarters from Portsmouth to Toulon to Wilhelmshaven. Across the Gulf states, the reaction was complex and revealing. Saudi Arabia and the UAE, which have their own fraught relationships with both Iran and the United States, issued measured statements calling for maritime security and respect for international law. But the private communication, according to diplomatic sources, was more direct. The Gulf monarchies have been watching American restraint in the face of Iranian provocations with growing concern, interpreting each unanswered harassment as evidence that Washington's commitment to Gulf security is weakening. The Fitzgerald engagement reverses that narrative. It tells Riyadh and Abu Dhabi that the American security umbrella still has teeth, that the Fifth Fleet is not merely a symbolic presence, but a force willing to use lethal capability when pushed. The lessons from this 6-hour confrontation are already being codified in operational planning documents across the world. First, the era of free harassment in the Persian Gulf is over. For 20 years, the IRGCN has operated under an implicit assumption that it can approach, buzz, shadow, and provoke American warships in the Gulf without consequence beyond radio warnings and flare guns. That assumption died at 1550 hours on May 5th, 2026. 30 meters from the hull of an Iranian patrol boat. The next IRGCN commander who orders a swarm approach on an American destroyer will do so knowing that the response may be high explosive, not high-frequency radio. Second, the rules of engagement have shifted from reactive to proactive. The Fitzgerald did not wait for an Iranian weapon to be fired before responding. The captain made the determination that the approach profile constituted hostile intent and engaged before a missile was launched, before a mine was dropped, before any Iranian weapon was employed. This is a fundamental doctrinal shift. It means American commanders in the Gulf now have the authority and the precedent to treat aggressive approach maneuvers as acts of hostile intent, warranting kinetic response. The burden of proof has moved from the defender to the aggressor. Third, Iran's swarm doctrine has been exposed as a single-use weapon. The swarm works when the target is unwilling to fire. The moment the target fires, the swarm scatters. 5 IRGCN vessels turned and ran within 11 minutes of a single near-miss round. This suggests that the swarm's effectiveness depends entirely on the assumption that the adversary will absorb the provocation rather than escalate. Remove that assumption, and the swarm is not a weapon. It is a collection of small, unarmored boats moving at high speed toward a ship with a 5-inch gun and a 20-millimeter Gatling system that fires 4,500 rounds per minute. The mathematics are catastrophic. Fourth, the 6-hour timeline reveals the agonizing deliberation behind what appeared to be a sudden escalation. The Fitzgerald's captain did not fire impulsively. The captain spent 6 hours exhausting every graduated response in the manual: radio challenges in 2 languages, warning shots, defensive maneuvering, helicopter overflights, carrier air patrol, before authorizing a near engagement round. This was not recklessness. This was restraint taken to its absolute limit, and then, only then, exceeded by a single calculated step. Every critic who calls this an act of American aggression must answer one question: what else was the captain supposed to do? After 6 hours of warnings, after 3 radio challenges in 2 languages, after warning shots from a 5-inch gun, after assembling a defensive perimeter that included 2 destroyers, 4 fighter jets, and an attack submarine, what additional step of restraint remained? The answer is none. There was nothing left between the last warning and the first kill shot except the narrow space that the Fitzgerald's captain placed his round in. 30 meters off the hull, close enough to make the point, far enough to leave the decision about what happens next in Iranian hands. What looked like a sudden act of naval aggression was always something far more deliberate, far more measured, and far more carefully calibrated than any headline will convey. It was a message, delivered in the only language that the IRGCN has shown itself capable of understanding: the language of 5-inch high-explosive projectiles traveling at 800 meters per second across open water. Iran refused to turn. For 6 hours, Iran refused to turn. And in that refusal, in that arrogance born of 20 years of unanswered provocations, Iran miscalculated. It assumed the pattern would hold. It assumed that the Americans, as they had always done, would issue their warnings and swallow their frustration and let the Iranian boats return to port without a scratch. And for 20 years, that assumption was correct. On May 5th, 2026, it was not. The old rules of the Gulf: provoke without consequence, harass without response, swarm without risk, are finished. They died at 1550 hours on a Monday afternoon in a spray of seawater and shrapnel 30 meters from an Iranian hull, in a sound that carried across the water and into the operational planning rooms of every navy in the world. The new rules are simpler, clearer, and infinitely more dangerous. Approach an American warship with hostile intent in the Persian Gulf, and the response will not be a radio call. It will be a firing solution. The question now is not whether the Americans will fire again. The question is whether Iran is smart enough, disciplined enough, and realistic enough to make sure they do not have to. Stay vigilant, stay informed. What do you think happens next? Does Iran back down and accept the new reality? Or does it double down and test the limits of the line that was just drawn in the water? Drop your honest thoughts in the comments. We read every single one. If this analysis opened your eyes, hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you never miss a briefing. Until next time, stay sharp.